Good afternoon, and welcome to the first webinar in our four-part webinar and workshop series. Today's webinar is titled Exploring and Defining the Research Landscape Within the Discipline of Architecture. My name is Karen Brous. I'm Assistant Professor and Graduate Program Director at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. I'm also the Design Editor for TAD, the Journal of Technology, Architecture, and Design. TAD is an international peer-reviewed journal of the Association of Collegiate Schools of Architecture. The journal is dedicated to the advancement of scholarship in the field of building technology with a focus on the impact, translation, and integration of technology in architecture and design. The journal features solicited and peer-reviewed papers discussing primary research on a broad range of topics, including emerging materials, construction techniques, structures and building systems, energy and environmental design, information technology, history and theory of technology, and building technology education. TAD is published by Taylor & Francis. If you're an ACSA member, you are likely already receiving a hard copy in your mailbox. You can also access TAD through the Taylor & Francis website, where select content is available for downloading. And if you'd like to learn more about the journal, you can go to our website for our editorial guidelines and also to access supplemental content for each issue, such as videos, downloadable files, and data files. You can meet us in person. We're hosting a panel at the ACSA annual meeting in Denver, where recent TAD authors will share presentations on their research that was published in our second issue, Simulations, and also will be coming out in our forthcoming issue, Open, this spring. At that panel, members of the TAD editorial board will also discuss strategies to prepare a successful submission for the journal. And we have two workshops that build on this webinar series. The first is a workshop at the annual meeting in Denver. That workshop is primarily designed for academics, particularly tenure track faculty in the early stages of the tenure process. We have a second workshop at the AIA Conference on Architecture this June in New York City with a focus on practitioners and the role of research in practice. During the workshops, participants will engage in interactive exercises to help move your research projects forward, and you can see an outline of the workshop format in the slide. If you're joining us today, you've no doubt received information about our series of webinars, which will build on and support the workshop topics. But you don't need to watch all the webinars to attend the workshop, and you don't need to attend the workshops to watch the webinars. They're different formats. The workshops are participatory and exercise-driven, while the webinars will showcase speakers from academia, the profession, and industry. You can see the topics listed here. And if you have colleagues or students who you think would benefit from the webinars, please let them know that ACSA will be making the videos available to watch within a few days. For today's webinar, we have selected a group of 4 researchers that reflect different roles, experience levels, and research types. Our panelists' work represents different positions on the spectrum that comprise contemporary architectural research, including design, history, theory, social science, and natural science-based models. Our first panelist, Dr. Marc Neveu, will be speaking about his own work, as well as the range and underlying thinking of the formats that are reviewed and published in the JAE. Our second presenter, Dr. Bess Krietemeyer, will be sharing how she frames project questions, how she structures her research and gains support for her projects, and she'll walk us through one of her current projects. Our third presenter, Dr. Joon-Ho Choi, will be speaking to the funding landscape and the interdisciplinary teams that he assembles, and our final presenter, Dr. Lynne Dearborn, will be speaking about the value and application of social science research in architecture. We'll first hear from our presenters through some short pre-recorded presentations. These will run for the first half hour of our time together. And then afterwards, our panelists will be on the call to answer your questions. A word first about logistics. In the GoToWebinar interface, you can see a chat section. We would really appreciate it if you could type your questions into this section, and we recommend that you do it while you're listening to the 4 pre-recorded presentations, so that we have questions lined up for each of our panelists when we get to the question and answer period. With that, I present our panelists' presentations.
Hello, my name is Marc Neveu. I'm the Associate Dean at Woodbury University in Los Angeles and the Executive Editor for the Journal of Architectural Education. Much of my scholarship considers the role of history within design education. Specifically, I'm interested in how the tradition of hermeneutics may offer an approach to both making and teaching. My interest in hermeneutics is focused on the role of history, the potential of fiction, and the opportunities found in the translation and interpretation of both. My dissertation, Architectural Lessons of Carlo Lodoli, surveys the origins of architectural education in the Veneto during the 18th century. Within that context, the dissertation more closely examines Carlo Lodoli's pedagogy. Unique to Lodoli was his use of architectural fables or apologues as instruction, and the dissertation includes the first ever translation of his fables into English. Lodoli's apologues combined historical and fictional characters in situations that were analogous to his students. His lessons were not necessarily deterministic, but were rather left open for interpretation by the students to act on their own. I have published multiple essays and book chapters derived from the dissertation. In 2015, Architecture's Appeal, co-edited with Negin Javaharian, was published by Routledge. The collection of essays situates the tradition of phenomenological hermeneutics within contemporary practice and includes essays from authors such as David Leatherbarrow, Stephen Hall, Karsten Harries, Kenneth Frampton, and Yanni Pelasma. A manuscript for the book Twisted, edited with Mehrdad Hadigi and Xian Yang, is in production and will be published in early 2018. The book is an oblique monograph on the Lafayette 148 building in Shantou, China. As well as helping to edit the collection, I contributed an essay on the translation between clothing and architecture, with specific focus on the nature of materials, in this case, concrete. More recently, I've lectured on the work of the architect Douglas Darden at a number of universities, and 3 book chapters have been published. I'm currently working on a book-length study of his projects based upon unprecedented access to his personal archive. His work, as presented in Condemned Building from 1993, and his pedagogy at the University of Colorado, brings together a unique approach to history, fiction, and the interpretation thereof to produce what he describes as rhetorical acts of building. In short, my research is grounded in historical interpretation and translation of primary sources and secondary source material, the result of which is typically text-based scholarship. I've been the executive editor of the Journal of Architectural Education since 2013. Since that time, the work published in the journal has evolved. Traditionally, we've reviewed 2 types of scholarship, scholarship of design and design as scholarship, and we have worked, however, to provide a variety of publishing opportunities through the journal. Scholarship of design essays are primarily text-based and roughly 7,000 words. To be accepted, essays must be grounded in relevant discourse, offer an original position, and be supported by appropriate visual and textual secondary sources. Work needs to be original. In other words, essays must shed new light on or unpack an issue in a way that is unique. The focus here is on interpretation and translation of artifacts rather than the collection of data. Design as scholarship manuscripts are primarily image-based and roughly 1,500 words. Essays are typically project-based, and the author of these essays is often, though not always, the author of the project as well. Design as scholarship as a category was introduced in the mid-1990s by Diane Gerardo and named as such by George Dodds a decade later. Under Dodd's tenure as executive editor, quote-unquote design articles became scholarship of design. The reason for the name change was twofold. The first was an acknowledgement that architectural scholarship is not limited to the scientific method, and second is a desire to move beyond the discursive limits of late 19th century art and architectural history models. More recently, we've introduced 2 additional types of peer-reviewed content, micronarratives and discursive images. Micronarratives examine material proto-histories of those things that continue to fly beneath the disciplinary radar, but without which architectural practice would be lost. These narratives can be actual accounts of architectural manufacture, or plausible fictions with heuristic potential for future disciplinary creation. Discursive images, a specific subset of the constructed imagery created by architects, are loaded. They are full of information, replete with spatial articulation, jam-packed with representational conceits and conventions, and overflowing with interpretive possibilities. While simultaneously concise in their delivery, refined in their graphic language, minimal in their aesthetic, and pithy in their communicative potential. They are discursive in both of its meanings, simultaneously meandering, digressive, diffuse, and visually verbose, while retaining the potent capacity to stimulate discourse on, in, and surrounding the discipline of architecture. Essential to all reviewed content is the process of double-blind peer review. Once an essay has been submitted, any identifying text is removed. The essay is distributed to the associate and/or theme editors, who then assign the essays to reviewers. The identity of the authors is not known to the reviewers, and the identity of the reviewers is not known to the authors. This ensures that the scholarship published in the journal is of the highest quality, and essays are chosen for their content rather than their author's reputation. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Bess Krietemeyer, and I'm an assistant professor in the School of Architecture at Syracuse University. I'm also a faculty research fellow at the Syracuse Center of Excellence, where I direct a lab called the Interactive Design and Visualization Lab. Here, my research is situated at the intersection of sustainable design, interactive visualization tools, and human and energy feedback systems. My research focus is on what I call bioresponsiveness in design, which is the development of simulation software and design environments that merge contemporary techniques for energy modeling with new visualization and interactive methods. The goal is to facilitate the integration of both user input and energy feedback systems in the design process. The Syracuse Center of Excellence has provided support in the form of funding and networking and facilities. As a faculty research fellow with the Syracuse COE, I've been able to conduct my research in a dedicated lab space with the equipment that I need. Locating my lab, which is the Interactive Design and Visualization Lab, at the COE strengthens opportunities for collaborative interdisciplinary research with faculty in other departments, with local artists, and other community members who attend COE events. It also provides opportunities for people to get hands-on experience with the tools that I'm developing, so I get really valuable input this way. Many of my research areas are sponsored by both internal and external resources, so grant writing is a big part of the process in order to support the team, which always includes faculty and students, and it also supports other needs for equipment or software or travel. So I'll briefly present one research area as an example of what I do. This one's called Shared Realities, which is a method for adaptive design for real-time user feedback. This is an active research area that I'm leading and working with collaborators Amber Bartosh and Lauren Covington. We're looking at new ways of combining 3D depth sensing and virtual reality technologies for a new type of user feedback design experience. In order to develop a focused research question and methodology, I situate my research and objectives relative to others in the field. So I identify related work, potential gaps in the research that my work aims to address, and then I develop my own research questions. So in this case, how can designers collect user behavior feedback with interactive systems in a realistic setting while in early design phases? And how might we collect anonymous real-time feedback from multiple vantage points? The methodology involves 3 interconnected steps. So one is the design and construction of an interactive museum installation about energy and the environment. 2 is the development of a mixed reality computational workflow. And 3 is the testing of the workflow by observing user behaviors with the installation itself. Each one of these steps had different research needs. For the installation, we needed a site and materials. For the workflow, we needed equipment like sensors, VR technologies, and projectors. And for the testing, we needed participants, people who we could observe interacting with the installation. So here it could be students, colleagues, or museum visitors, all of whom we'd get approval from to be recorded using our depth sensing system. So we constructed the installation and went through iterative design and testing of the interactive interface. So here a person can gesture around the model and view solar energy in a particular location for a customizable viewing experience. We developed a workflow to view the model and visitor activity in a virtual environment. The depth sensors capture user point cloud data, and the virtual reality technology allows us to get a very up-close and personal view of how they're interacting with the data display. The third step is to observe and analyze the user behaviors in order to improve the digital content and usability of the interface. So we had very specific questions and things we were looking for, like how they're using their gestures and which content they select. So we continue to look for these as we update the design. Finally, though this work is ongoing, it's important to disseminate the research along the way so we can get feedback from peers, but also share the contributions to others. This takes the form of books, journals, and conferences in architectural or related fields. And the intention is to create a methodology that's replicable and applicable to different architectural applications. So it's important to identify areas for improvement and also directions for future work so that others can continue to build on the research. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jonah Troy. I am an assistant professor in the School of Architecture at the University of Southern California. One of my research themes is human building integration. I would like to share this research platform in this webinar. These days, there are a lot of research opportunities available. However, depending on the grant funding agencies, the preferred research feature is very different. For example, the National Science Foundation always look for a high-risk and high-benefit research. The other hand, some research foundations prefer to support applied research. Therefore, we need to carefully develop a research proposal while understanding each individual organization's goals and research preferences. Today's interdisciplinary research is not optional anymore, but almost mandatory. This is a mode of research by teams or individuals that integrate multiple domain knowledges. I believe that architecture can be a research hub among multiple research areas. Architecture consists of multiple research components such as human factor, environment, technology, and physics. Therefore, architecture has a large capability to integrate other domain ideas. In the technology domain these days, there are many research efforts to develop a smart infrastructures. It can include smart city, smart building, smart system, and smart environmental control. However, I have seen there are many cases too much relying on system and computational approaches without consideration of human factors. This current technical limitation has motivated us to develop a biosensing adaptive environmental control in the workplace. This research basically utilizes human physiological signals such as skin temperature, skin moisture, and heart rate to estimate an individual user's thermal sensation in real time. This research outcome can be combined with an existing HVAC system to generate an optimal thermal condition for the user. Therefore, this research contributes to the building occupants' environmental comfort and work productivity by optimizing the indoor environmental condition. For this interdisciplinary research, we are currently collaborating with multiple researchers in the engineering and medicine as well as green building relevant industry partners with the support of National Science Foundation. Based on the use of human physiological principles, the second research is relevant to an advanced visual comfort model development as a function of human eyes pupil size. Based on this research principle, we are developing workstation layout design, lighting control, shading device design, and glare control. This research is also expected to contribute to enhancing a building occupant's visual health and work productivity while optimizing the lighting energy performance. For this research, we are currently collaborating with other investigators of the USC Engineering, Medicine, and Doheny Eye Institute with the support of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. Last but not least, comprehensive post-occupancy evaluation is another interdisciplinary study in my research group. We focus on air, thermal, acoustic, lighting, and spatial quality to enhance the overall building indoor environmental quality. In this research, we measure indoor environmental quality data, conduct a user satisfaction survey, and collect building technical attribute data. Based on the collected data, we use advanced data mining algorithms to investigate the relationship between human factors and the environmental design parameters so that we can develop an optimal IEQ design guidelines to enhance the occupant's health, productivity, and environmental sustainability. I believe architecture as a research hub has many potentials to be integrated with other research domains. In some cases, it's not easy to integrate because of lack of communication skill with other domain researchers or insufficient relevant domain knowledge. However, this limitation also provides us with a chance to develop a research opportunity with other disciplines. In that way, we can continuously find research questions and answers. This is all for today. If you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you.
We might think of human-focused architectural research as social science research in the realm of architecture, but in my experience, the work of researchers who are informed by a design background has a different sensitivity to the detail and composition of the environment. As these researchers conduct research projects, they pay careful attention to characteristics of the environment across a range of scales, so human-focused research conducted by scholars in architecture becomes much more useful and informative in the design process. People are the reason we do what we do. The purpose of modifying the environment through architecture and landscape construction is first and foremost to support basic human needs in the present and future. To do this well, designers must understand what constitutes basic human needs generally and in specific conditions, how basic needs differ by demographics and individual experience, how designed environments can be supportive in specific conditions, and where environments fail to meet human needs. The relationship between social science research and architectural design suggests that design and research are different but supportive activities that can work together in knowledge generation. Research and design should be conceived as linked and mutually reinforcing. Design undertakings seek to solve a particular set of problems. Designed environments provide a best guess about an appropriate solution. Both design process and designed environments generate questions which can engender a research project. Human beings are the primary paying and non-paying clientele for architectural creations. They form the main constituency that must be satisfied by our work. Social science research focused on people and designed environments can help us understand who we are or should be serving and their needs and desires. Quantitative studies answer questions of who, what, where, and when. They result in data reflecting countable and categorizable things. Large data sets with many responses often result. A general sense of who, where, and when is possible using statistical analysis. Qualitative studies help us understand why people behave in a particular way and how they perceive environments and feel about particular places and virtual environments that designers may simulate. Qualitative studies can provide much information useful for design, but may yield results not broadly generalizable. Mixed method studies that incorporate both quantitative and qualitative data enable a more holistic understanding of a situation. An example from my own human-centered research sought to understand how the environment in Milwaukee, Wisconsin supported acculturation of Hmong refugees from Southeast Asia, a vulnerable group living in particular neighborhoods and housing in the city, and how those environments might be more supportive. This was a mixed quantitative and qualitative study. This map illustrates how I used geocoded U.S. Census data to identify areas where Hmong immigrants clustered. In this project, I teamed with ACTS Housing, an organization that assisted low and moderate income families to purchase and rehab older homes in some of these neighborhoods. I developed a quantitative data set that brought together information about ACTS property sales and rehab assistance and city tax assessor and property ownership records. That database of 369 ACTS-supported homeowners enabled me to answer questions like who had purchased and at what cost. These data highlighted 201 Hmong owner-occupant households, my pool of potential participants for the study's next stage. The qualitative stage involved documentation of the physical environment and household activities and in-depth interviews in each of 42 households. This helped me understand the story of each, how and why they'd purchased their home, how they conducted their daily life within their home and neighborhood, how they felt about their home and living in a particular neighborhood in Milwaukee. Analysis of these data enabled me to understand overall how physical and social characteristics of housing and neighborhood nurtured immigrant acculturation for these households, and how to recreate the environment as more supportive of their desired level of inclusion in the cultural mainstream. In this project, I engaged people and queried them about their thoughts, ideas, and opinions about the built environment. I also used private identifiable information related to their homes, their families, and themselves. It's human subjects research that necessitated IRB approval from my university before beginning the work. I worked with a team of 3 language and cultural translators. A strong and trusting relationship with a partnering not-for-profit organization was critical to the study's success. Much of the work architects do involves interacting with people and trying to understand what they want in a design outcome. Done in an ad hoc way, it yields the anecdotes that guide design process. When we engage with building users and paying and non-paying clients of our design work through a planned programming or feedback process, we are in the realm of human-centered research. Architects conduct research when they collect or analyze information in a systematic way with the intention of using it to inform design or contribute to generalizable knowledge useful to a larger subset of professionals and the public. This research may be proprietary in nature and useful for a particular client with no intention of broader dissemination. It still has the potential to harm particular participants if not conducted in a manner respectful of privacy expectations and which preserves confidentiality. Proprietary information is useful and provides important guidance for design decisions in specific projects, but if not disseminated within the profession more broadly, research doesn't help improve the overall quality of the environment, and for human-focused research, the broader daily environmental experiences of the public. Dissemination of research findings within and beyond the profession provides a path to exponentially improve human experience and better meet basic human needs. Oftentimes, this is the role played by human-focused architectural researchers in academia. Academics may engage with human-focused research as one part of their scholarly output. That work comes with the expectation that findings be broadly disseminated to academic, professional, and sometimes public audiences, often with the caveat of peer review to confirm its scholarly contributions.
Well, thank you so much for those presentations. This is Karen Grouse. I'm the moderator for what should be about a half-hour conversation. For our panelists and our audience, I want to start off with something. We're going to have a few webinars this semester that have a range of different presenters, but it turns out that for this particular presentation, all of our presenters are very accomplished PhDs with very different research areas. So what recommendation do you have for the people who are joining us today, some of whom may be new faculty, some may be coming out of practice or a culminating master's degree, and who are looking to strengthen their research expertise And I guess as a follow-up question, as we go around and ask each of you, I would ask, how do you recommend that people joining us today find their place on the spectrum of research and their community of scholars to engage in discourse? So maybe we'll just go in order. Marc, if you could start us off.
Okay, thanks. I was just trying to unmute my phone. So thank you very much. And I appreciate all of the presentations. It's really great to see the range of work that's happening. One thing I would mention, I guess I would have three sort of points of advice. One would be to focus. And it's something that it was advice that was given to me when I started. I had a lot of ideas of what I wanted to work on. I had a lot of topics that I wanted to work on, but really trying to sort of focus early on and then let the projects happen over time is better than trying to do 77 different projects at once. So focus is important. I think finding a mentor, somebody at your school who can help you manage expectations is really quite important. Every school is different and every program has different expectations. So trying to figure out what exactly is the context where you are is important, and a mentor can really help with that. And then lastly, I would say that it's really important to find a model. And what I mean by that is that there are lots of different types of research. And if you find somebody, or you can sort of locate somebody who's doing something that you think is interesting and is working in ways that you want to work, and they're further along in their career, you can actually figure out what they did, where they published, how they did research, what institutes they established, et cetera, and use them as a model for your own research. So you don't have to feel like you're sort of on your own. I'll leave it at that.
Great, thank you so much. Bess, do you want to pick that up? Okay, maybe Joon-Ho, could you speak a little bit about some advice you might have?
Yeah, sure. First of all, thank you for organizing this webinar to share our ideas with the research community. So actually, for the junior faculty who, especially from the practice domain, I'd like to suggest the enhancing the knowledge of a specific design function and its merit. Actually, so there are a lot of as Professor Dearborn said, there are a lot of some sociology factor and human factor, and also especially regarding human factor, there are a lot of some complicated function of human physiological or psychological some element, such as some productivity or psychological health or stress, and even patient average length of stay or stress mitigation. So if they have a kind of some relatively low experience in especially regarding a kind of design impact, so my recommendation is to exercise that there's some design function in other domain, which is non-architecture maybe. So it means that there are many researchers or experts who investigate and develop those some human physiological domain knowledge, focusing on some especially psychology and human physics. However, they have, in many cases, I have seen that they have very limited knowledge how to integrate such expert knowledge in the architecture domain. So because as I mentioned in the webinar, the interdisciplinary research is kind of some required all over the places. So my recommendation is very simple. So if you want to be a kind of an interdisciplinary researcher, just mix with some other domain people as much as possible, so that to start the thinking how your design idea can be used as an input or output in other domain. Yeah.
That's great. I'm really appreciating the drill down knowledge here. And I definitely want to return to that question of connecting with other people, Jhin-Ho. But first, why don't we hear from Lynne? And I know that Bess is working on getting her audio to work.
So
I guess the place I would begin is to have an individual reflect on what are they really interested in. And as I said in my presentation, a lot of times research questions can come from design experiences or experiences of just being in the physical environment. And so that's where I usually tell my students to begin. I mean, I think Marc's advice of focusing, finding one area and one thing to begin with, and to kind of start to test out ideas about how you might investigate that. Who's involved? Is it a people-focused question? Is it a physical environment-focused question? Is it a history-focused question? Because the methods will be different. The one thing that I would recommend that anyone who's interested in and doesn't really have a good solid grounding in research, there's a book called Architectural Research Methods by Linda Grote and Wang, and David Wang, and it actually goes through all these different types of research and helps sort of lead one through the process of how you might ask a question and how you might start to think about answering that question.
That's great. Thank you so much. That's definitely a classic. There are also some other books that are maybe not as comprehensive, but worth taking a look at, some of which we reviewed in our first issue of TAD, the viral issue. So for people who are looking for a bibliography of those types of books to look at, you can start there. Let's see if Bess, you're able to get your audio to work and jump in here. Okay, I'm not sure if that's working, so maybe Danielle from ACSA can jump in and troubleshoot a little bit. In the meantime, I wanted to come back to the follow-up question, which is, once you've identified something that you're interested in, a kind of domain or a type of question that you're interested in, how would you recommend that people find a community of scholars beyond, let's say, ACSA, that they might join and engage in discourse and figure out what are the primary publishing platforms? Maybe do we want to double back? We could go backwards. Lynne, you could jump in here.
Okay, so I guess one piece of advice that was given to me when I started my current position many years ago is to find a product, a research product that you want to emulate, and it in some ways goes, I think, to Marc's find a model, but that will help sort of identify a path and an end product. And so for me, that's always been really good advice. Whose material do you want to emulate? Where did they publish it? What is it? Is it article length? Is it book length? Understanding, obviously, that there are very different kinds of energies and resources and length of time that goes into either of those two products, or maybe it's some other kind of product. Maybe it's an exhibition or something else. So I think that's a good place to begin.
Fantastic. Joon-Ho, do you have any thoughts on that? Or maybe Marc, do you want to jump in there? I appreciate your thoughts on finding a model. Would you suggest sort of reaching back into people's CVs and looking at places where they've done work and funding that they've gone after? How would you go about that?
I think that's one way to do it. But maybe I should sort of be a little more clear on that too. When I started doing my dissertation, my model was my advisor. Since that time, the printing or the publication context has radically changed, and I made a conscious decision not to try to publish a book, but rather to chop up my dissertation and publish it as a series of essays and book chapters. And that, I think, is something to keep in mind. It's not the kind of maybe art historical model of producing a sole authored monograph as the only way to tenure has completely changed. So I think by looking not only for a model in architecture, but also trying to find collaboration from outside of the discipline is super important. And I think, from my experience, one of the dangers we have as architects is we think we know everything about everything, and we constantly want to bring in other fields to our inquiry, when I actually feel like when we work with other people from outside of architecture, it just makes our research better. So the model that I would suggest is certainly by talking to people who have done what you think you want to do, but also getting outside of the discipline. And I think what Joon-Ho is doing, for example, that's the model of research for me. It's really getting outside of our discipline and really getting interested and working with collaboration from outside of architecture.
Well, great. That's a good lead in because Jhin-Ho has his mic fixed now. And I wanted to ask him, and if we can get Bess's mic fixed, a few questions about some of the interdisciplinary projects that you're working on. So Jhin-Ho, you're working on some very large projects with diverse teams. How would somebody new to this type of work either assemble a team or approach other schools within their university or other faculty to work together? What would you recommend as a first step?
So actually, according to my experience, so I have found that it is very kind of some best option to attend some conference which is a non-architecture domain. So for example, at the beginning of my career, I frequently attended some human factor relevant or ergonomics relevant or human-computer interaction and cyber-physical system, and those are some non-architecture domain conferences I try to attend as many as possible. So actually, through the conferences, I was able to meet very different people compared to the architecture domain. So I was able to figure out what is the potential of my work can be used as an input or output in other domain. So after I came back to my campus, I started just knocking door of some other domain professors. So as a junior faculty at the time, I had nothing to lose. So I knocked many doors. I had knocked many doors in College of Medicine, College of Engineering, and also some social science and psychology. So in some case, I was very successfully to be involved in some very serious conversation with the faculty and their team. So in some case, I was frequently invited to their seminar or weekly seminar or monthly seminar. So such as some conversation kind of taught me how to develop my idea more specific way and communicatable way in other domain people. So I believe I may be wrong. So I have a kind of good at taekwondo. So I have a black belt. The thing is that I believe that in some case, somebody may hate this metaphor, but in some case, I believe that kind of some learning fighting skill from the street fighting might be more effective than learning taekwondo in an institute. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So you're suggesting in their spare time, don't do taekwondo, just go out in the street, do some fighting. Okay. No, I do have a few follow-ups, and then I think Bess is logged back in. So it sounds like you put a decent amount of time into developing these relationships. When you were first trying to work together on a project with these other faculty, did you need to do something to establish your value, or did you need to do some sort of seed projects together? Did you need to bring the funding, or how were some of those first steps negotiated? How, in terms of those early conversations about working together?
Yeah, in that way, the kind of startup, the funding is a kind of research seed money is really important. So actually, I believe that all architecture school across the nation may have not sufficient funding to support in that way. So I started having a kind of conversation with industry partner because that they have some facility, they have some equipment and devices. So, but those industry partner also look for kind of very cutting edge research because they want to make a kind of mass production in the near future. So in that way, I was able to start kind of collaborating with the industry partner. So by utilizing their resources, I was able to set up my research infrastructure. So, and definitely the student, my undergraduate and graduate student, helping me a lot. So, and then I started some studying like a kind of a communication kind of protocol in other domain. For example, okay, if I want to talk with some computer scientists or human computer interaction people, I need to have at least, I need to equip myself with a kind of fundamental knowledge in that domain. So otherwise, it's not easy to communicate with them. So those are some kind of skill, and those are some fundamental knowledge and technical skill that I studied. That is really helpful because that whenever we had a kind of conversation and a meeting, we are able to find that we are on the same page and we are on the same level of idea or thinking process, so that we can make a more productive outcome. Yeah.
That's great. And I know you may need to jump off at some point to get to class. So I'm going to turn to Bess, and let's see if we can get you on this call now, Bess, and see, if you want to return to some of the earlier questions about advice, or if you want to talk a little bit about some of the interdisciplinary research teams you're working on. We'd love to hear from you.
Sure. Can you hear me now okay?
Perfect.
Great. Sorry about that earlier. So yeah, some of my comments do relate for sure to one of the first questions and also to this interdisciplinary question. I think especially for new faculty, this issue of focus is so important, and establishing that focus area can take some time. In my experience, what I found was, especially at the university, taking advantage of university-wide events that might specifically be geared toward new faculty was really, really helpful for me. So some of these events might have just been, how to write a research grant, or maybe it was just sort of an informal networking event. But this is a way to really get to know some of the other people who were also, maybe came with some research interests, but were looking for ways that their work could evolve. So that was a way that I met a lot of collaborators in other departments specifically. And what's also helpful is even in some of these informal conversations, it does really bring a unique perspective when you start explaining your work, a different perspective that can give you some inspiration for how to evolve your own work. A couple of other tips, I guess, related to some of the questions were, again, sort of, when defining your model or trying to define your focus area, to really try to attend conferences if you have the funding to do so, and not necessarily even as a presenter, although I think it's important to present the work, but just to attend conferences, again, as a kind of networking scheme or a way to learn about cutting edge work that's not yet even published in journals. So that's a great way to, again, sort of align your interests with others and sort of position yourself within a particular field. And then related to that is just the opportunity to kind of present your ideas to an audience in order to get any kind of feedback. So whether that's to a mentor or to kind of a small internal group within your school or university, I've always found the opportunity to get that feedback to be just really, really highly beneficial in terms of, identifying some of the weaknesses of maybe your claim or your research questions, but then really pushing it in other directions.
Great. And did you want to speak at all about, I know you have some diverse teams that you're working with. Could you speak a little bit? It sounds like you met some of those people initially through some university-wide events. Could you speak a little bit about how you brought people together, how you structure your teams, or one follow-up question I have is like any important conversations that you think, conversations that need to happen among team members before you start to embark on a project together in order for the work to go more smoothly?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I've worked with a whole range of people in other fields, whether it's material scientists, computer scientists, um, even in conversation with other social scientists, people in other human factors related fields. These conversations have led to grants that we've worked on together, successful grants. So I think it's, you know, in setting up those conversations, you definitely want to bring some ideas to the table, bring some research questions, have some kind of something you can, I think, present is helpful, whether that's, you know, some ongoing work or sort of proof of concept, something that can sort of easily communicate to the other group what it is that you're doing, what you're seeking, what you're looking for. I also think it's important when seeking other collaborators, and you know, the work that I had presented in this webinar is definitely not something I could accomplish on my own. There's a lot of technical components, things that you know, levels of expertise that I really needed to seek out in order to accomplish the work. And I think it's important when you're looking for some of those other people with other expertise that you make sure it's a very collaborative kind of method or a collaborative approach where you're not necessarily assigning a task to somebody, but you're really interested in learning from that other discipline, learning from that other level of expertise to see what that could bring to the project in general. So I guess, you know, in setting up some of these initial meetings, having a set of questions in your back pocket, having some issues, you're, you know, identifying weaknesses, things you're trying to work through, and having some knowledge of what they're capable of doing and what opportunities and things that they could possibly bring to the table is more likely to land sort of a successful collaboration.
That's really helpful. Lynne, is this a question that you've dealt with in your work?
So one of the other, I guess, opportunities on our campus, we have interdisciplinary centers that often have sponsor events, have opportunities to interact with others from different units on campus. So, for example, right now, I've just been through some meetings with so we have a relatively new unit called the Interdisciplinary Health Sciences Institute. And they wouldn't necessarily have reached out to someone in the School of Architecture or the College of Fine and Applied Arts, but I just contacted them and said, let's meet. And they have just started a new area in health disparities, which the built environment is a large factor in that. And so getting, you know, the opportunity to interact with others that are interested in that same area across a range of different, you know, not even where I might ordinarily think to look, people who are interested in the topic and interested in the same kinds of research questions that I am, to begin those conversations, and for them to understand. I think sometimes I've found there's people aren't necessarily aware of what someone from a design discipline might bring to a research team. And so sometimes you are involved in really explaining what we do as designers and what kinds of things we look at, and what might be helpful in terms of the kinds of questions that they're asking, to, you know, in some ways to kind of reflect on the question that they're asking, to describe how what we look at might be a component or another addition to the kinds of things that they're already involved with.
Great. That's so I'm hearing there. Don't wait to be invited. Go out and find somebody who's looking at something that you're interested in, and see how you might ask questions together. Marc, I have a few questions for you, and we have about 4 minutes left. So the first question, I'm going to sort of follow up on these questions about interdisciplinary teams because you brought it up, or even same disciplinary teams. I know that you've had some partners in writing books and co-editors. Could you speak a little bit about some structures that you use to work together, or how you start those conversations?
Yeah, I think it develops out of a sort of interest in a project, and the project kind of grows from there. I've had, for me, the project of the JAE, for example, has been one of the most enjoyable sort of experiences I've had in my professional life. It's really pretty amazing to kind of bring people together around a table and produce these journals. And there's lots of various content, diverse content. It's actually been kind of amazing. So that structure is sort of set up. But in terms of other projects, it's really about the project and then getting the right people on board. I think one of the issues I have, or not issues, I shouldn't say that, but I think one of the shortfalls I find with sort of history theory research is that we're often not a part of these institutes. And I actually think that there's a pretty interesting potential role for that to happen. And I'm not sure that that's the fault of the institute. I think it's actually the way in which sometimes projects are framed. But I do think there's a lot of potential out there for much more interdisciplinary work within history and theory. That is just, I think we're a bit slow actually at sort of turning the page on that stuff. Yeah, so I would just maybe say that the project really leads the collaboration.
Great. So maybe before we wrap up, I do just have one follow-up question for you about, it's a big topic, but if you have, just a minute here, could you speak a little bit from the perspective of the JE executive editor about some of the scope or trajectories of research that you've been seeing in terms of the material that's coming in, or the themes that start to bubble up? Are you seeing shifts? It sounds like, for example, you're saying history theory is a little bit later coming to team-based work or interdisciplinary collaborations. What other things are you seeing in terms of trajectories?
I think one of the things we've really tried to support is design-based research, and we've done so by including design as scholarship categories, micro-narrative categories, even discursive images, where an image could be peer-reviewed and published as a discursive thing. So I think that opening up of the JAE to be less about historical and maybe theoretical or critical writing, and more about design writing, discursive design writing, has been, I think, a really good shift. And it's something that I think has helped. We've gotten a lot more submissions, I should say, from ACSA faculty. And I think it actually helps faculty who aren't sort of coming from a history theory bias to actually get peer-reviewed scholarship published. And that's been a good thing. So for us, it's really been trying to embrace the design component of research for the last 10 years or so. And we're definitely moving forward in that direction.
Fantastic. Thank you for that perspective. So we're at 3 o'clock now. I'm going to wrap up our conversation for today. I really want to thank our panelists. And I also want to say to the folks joining the webinar, we of course have 3 more. And this group today, we didn't see a lot coming in through the chat box, but feel free to follow up with any of us, including our panelists, or you can funnel questions through me if you have any follow-up questions, and be sure to send us your email address, and we'll try to address them and get back to everybody. But thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.